All right. Hello and welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us for our Clean Water webinar today. My name is Maggie Dombrowski, and I am the Mid-Atlantic Save Our Streams coordinator here at the Isaac Walton League of America. So a lot of my work focuses on our Virginia Save Our Streams benthic macroinvertebrate volunteer monitoring program. And so our webinar today is about advocacy at the local level, and it is going to have a bit of a Virginia-centric lens. All of our lovely panelists today are from Virginia. So as we're getting started here, if everybody wants to put in the chat where you are tuning in from and your name, your organization, we'd love to hear from everyone who's here. Throughout the webinar, if you have any questions, you can go ahead and put them in the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen, and we'll make sure to get to those at the very end of the webinar. So we'll answer the questions from all the speakers at the very end. Alrighty, so today we're going to kick off with Ashley Palmer from the Northern Virginia Soil and Water Conservation District. She's going to give us an overview and introduction to advocacy. And then we're going to dive into two case studies. So our first case study is about data to impact coming out of Luckett's, Virginia. And that will be shared with us by Amy Euland from Loudon Wildlife Conservancy. And then our second case study is going to be about Stream Health Tracking Partnership in Christiansburg, Virginia. And we'll have both Patricia Colatosti from the town of Christiansburg and Carol Kaufman from the local New River Valley Virginia Master Naturalist chapter sharing about that one. And I'll just mention that we are recording this webinar and it will be posted on our YouTube channel sometime later this afternoon. In case you want to look back at anything. And I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Ashley.
Awesome. Thanks, Maggie. Let me go ahead and get my screen up. Can you all see that?
Looks great.
Yes. Excellent. Awesome. Thank you. Thanks so much for the introduction, Maggie. Really excited to be here. There's so many people who are really interested in advocacy and really excited to be a part of that. My name is Ashley Palmer, and I'm the Communication and Education Specialist at the Northern Virginia Soil and Water Conservation District. My role in this webinar is to give a brief overview of advocacy, why it's important to me, to you, to our communities, and to our environment. And throughout my couple slides, I'll have photos of real case studies of advocacy that I've supported or participated in. And I've actually seen that a couple of people who might be in these photos or were at these events are attendees. So it'll be fun to see yourselves on screen. Just a little bit about the Northern Virginia Soil and Water Conservation District. If you are not familiar with what we do, a conservation district is a form of local government. We work very closely with our counties to promote hands-on conservation, technical expertise, to help protect and restore natural resources. We are not a regulatory agency, so we don't get to tell people what to do, and they really like that. So we're really partners in conservation with the public. Northern Virginia Soil and Water is one of 47 conservation districts in Virginia and one of over 3,000 nationwide. So if you're not tapped into a conservation district and their resources yet, I highly recommend you look into them. I support NVSWCD as an environmental educator and our stream monitoring program coordinator. We have a highly robust stream monitoring program, which has been operating since the early 1990s. We participate in Virginia Save Our Streams, Salt Watch, and Nitrate Watch. So starting off with what is advocacy, it's nice to kind of start with some shared definitions. Advocacy is an activity by an individual or group that aims to influence decisions within political, economic, and social institutions. So essentially, you're doing something to make change. When you talk about environmental advocacy, you're just putting a little bit of environmental turn on that. Environmental advocacy is an activity by an individual or group that aims to influence decisions within political, economic, and social institutions to promote sustainability and protect the environment. So in this photo, we have some storm drain labeling volunteers. We run the storm drain labeling program in Fairfax County. So these folks were learning about water pollution, and they realized that what goes into our storm drains goes directly to streams, doesn't get cleaned up, goes directly to streams. And they were really worried about what was happening in their community. And they had seen some people pour like oil or soaps down the drain and weren't excited about that. So they wanted to put the no dumping drains to Potomac stickers on all their storm drains to make sure that they could help prevent some of that pollution because they were advocating for pollution prevention and clean water. Advocacy is also other things than just the definition that I've given you. So advocacy is also a critical component of environmental literacy. And as an environmental educator, that's something I'm really passionate about. We'll talk a little bit more about the definitions for that on the next slide. But essentially, it's really important to be able to advocate for your environment as part of being environmentally literate. It's one in many of a wide range of civic actions, which can include volunteering, voting, engaging with decision makers, and of course, advocacy. And it's also important to look a little bit at the difference between education and advocacy. In, in education, we seek to provide only information. So providing reliable resources and tools that you can use to do experiments and gather information about the world. Advocacy takes that information to the next step and uses it to influence decisions. There's no advocacy without education, and they are two parts of the same journey. And in the photo here, we have a student who engaged in a program called the Youth Conservation Leadership Institute, and they led other students in activism in a green club at their school. And so here in this picture, he's telling others about the project that he did. And you can see some of the posters that they made. They have like the Lorax, and they're talking about climate change. They did a rally in DC that everyone had participated in. So what is environmental literacy? So environmental literacy is essentially the knowledge and the skills to make action happen on behalf of the environment. It's a critical component of the Chesapeake Bay Watershed Agreement, which is an agreement between all the states and districts in the Chesapeake Bay watershed about how we're going to protect and preserve the watershed resources for years to come. And we have an environmental literacy goal within that Bay Agreement, which reads that we enable students in the region to graduate with the knowledge and skills to act responsibly to protect and restore their local watershed. So we understand that it's important for students to have both knowledge and skills to be able to make decisions, which is where the advocacy part comes in. The North American Association for Environmental Education, NAAE, says that environmental literacy includes essential skills that enable individuals to make informed decisions and act on those decisions both individually and collectively. So again, we're seeing knowledge and skills, which help to develop into action as part of your journey. So what does advocacy look like? So we're talking about this big concept of advocacy, but really it's going to look different for everyone. It's age appropriate. You wouldn't expect a kindergartner to participate in the same level or the same type of advocacy that an adult would. It's dependent on your resources, your knowledge, and your skills. So that's why it's going to be very age appropriate depending on where you are in your journey, and who you have as a support system, like your teachers or your family. It's built on the knowledge of environmental systems and structures. You must have the knowledge to be a well-informed advocate. Great example I have is that if someone asks me, oh, what kind of car should I drive? What kind of car should I get? I have no idea. I don't know anything about cars. That's not my department. I can't be an informed advocate on what's the safest car to drive or the best car to drive or the fastest car to drive because I don't have the knowledge of those systems and structures. I do know about the environment, so I can be a good advocate there. You have to make connections between the environment, society, and culture. So advocacy is going to look different based on your experiences within these realms. So for someone who is in a different culture than you, their type of advocacy might look a little bit different. And society and culture also inform our relationship with the environment. So part of advocacy is being aware of other cultures and societies and how they may interact with the environment. You also have to understand the impact individual choices have on local and global scales, and understanding that individual actions do have an impact is a huge part of advocacy. Knowing that you are able to make a difference in your community and your world is incredibly important in advocacy. And advocacy is also individual and meaningful. It's going to be different for everyone. In this photo, I'm at an event called Lunch at the Landfill, which was led by a group called Sustainability Matters. And they were looking at what can we do with landfills once they're capped and covered over, because it's kind of a bit of a dead space. So the idea was to put native pollinator meadow plantings on landfills. This is the I-66 transfer station in Fairfax, and the meadow is there if you want to go visit. They have great signage. And so for this event, we had lunch and snacks, and we invited the press and a lot of folks dressed up for fun, because dressing up is fun, and also for awareness. I'm dressed up as a moth here. There were other people dressed up. You can't see them in this picture, but I promise there were other folks dressed up. And that helped to get some attention from the press. So I was passionate about this pollinator meadow, and so I was advocating for that through my costume and my attendance at the event. Now I've got 4 examples of advocacy in action. These are all real world examples of folks that I've worked with and supported. Some of them are also on this meeting and call today. So the first example is an example of volunteering. So in this example, Stephen wants to know how healthy his local streams are. So he decides to volunteer at a stream monitoring workshop. And this is that volunteer in action. He is now certified and he joins workshops regularly. He's a great help at our workshops and can tell you an awful lot about our local streams because of his engagement in this program. Voting is another type of advocacy. So in this example, Ashley researches candidates to make sure their environmental goals align with her interests before voting. I could not give you a photo of me voting because you can't take photos in a voting booth. But here I'm at a climate event where I'm advocating for composting, which supports climate action. So that shows one of my interests, climate action, that I look for in reviewing candidates before voting. And then I have 2 examples of engaging with decision makers. The first are these students make posters to tell everyone in their community to help prevent litter. So here are our students working on their posters, hard at work. In this case, the decision makers for these students are the adults who live in the community, their parents, their grandparents, their families, who make the purchasing decisions that they can't make yet because they're still children. So they have learned about litter. They don't like living in a dirty community. They don't want to live around litter, but they aren't the ones who are making the purchasing decisions with single-use plastics and things like that. So here they are informing the other folks in their community who do make those purchasing decisions about what they want to see happen. They also have a second decision maker that they're talking to with these posters. So in this community, there is a lot of litter. And it's not because people don't care about the environment, and it's not because people are messy. It's actually because the community complex does not have enough dumpsters for the number of people who live there, and there is very infrequent trash pickup. So the dumpsters get really, really full, critters get in there, trash goes all over the place. So regardless of how clean the environment or how clean these kids want the environment to be, they have to talk to their decision makers, the apartment complex managers, and the property owners about making sure there's resources that we are preventing the litter in this community. And my second example is where residents of Alexandria, Virginia are meeting with their district supervisor to talk to him about how important clean water is to their community. So in this example, these residents did a series of trainings on environmental topics. So they learned about invasive plants and water quality and pollution prevention. And then they spoke to their district supervisor to talk about the environmental concerns that were most important to their community. So you can see in each of these examples, there's that education first. They're learning about something first and then able to take action. And here in this picture, it's a little difficult to see, but on the PowerPoint slide that are showing, they're talking about the importance of having a seat at the table. Having a seat at the table is incredibly important, no matter who you are or where you come from. There are big decisions being made at every level that you can influence as an advocate. So being well informed and having a seat at that table and making sure that you take up space at that table are great ways to be able to make that advocacy happen. So finally, I get to talk a little bit about the benefits of advocacy. So like I mentioned, that seat at the table is incredibly important. Um, Participating in advocacy, engagement in advocacy, increases feelings of self-agency in a time of climate paralysis. So this generation that's coming up, Gen Alpha. I think we're into Gen Beta now, I think. There's a lot of climate paralysis going on because we're constantly talking about various different challenges that we're facing with water quality, with increasing storms. In Fairfax County, we call it warmer, wetter, weirder weather, which is going to be happening and keep happening with climate change. There are so many different societal factors about how you participate in and understand climate change, how your culture engages with the environment. And it really leaves our young people in particular with a feeling of paralysis. There's so much wrong that I can't do anything about it, so I'm not going to do anything about it. But engaging in advocacy allows you to realize what your impact really is. And that's important for our personal growth and for our cultural growth as well. It also helps to develop a scientifically informed public, which is adept in systems thinking. As I've mentioned, when you're talking about the environment and advocacy, we're looking not only at the environment, but society, culture. We're looking at existing laws, policies, our governmental structure. We're looking at how different communities use the environment and how we enjoy the environment. Everybody enjoys their outdoor time in the environment a little bit differently. So understanding how all of these things are connected to each other, maybe someone who lived in a rural community got to do a lot of fishing. And so that is how they participate in talking about advocacy is they talk about their right to fish. Maybe someone else who grew up in a really urban community had a lot of stormwater issues in their hometown, and so there was a lot of flooding. And so they talk about preventing flooding as their advocacy, but they're all really about the same thing as protecting the environment, but the avenue may change. It also increases communication, collaboration, and leadership, which are all really important skills to become a fully developed human being, to be able to advocate for yourself, for others, for the environment, and to advocate not only for the environment, for other things that are important in your life, your health, your societal well-being, your needs and the needs of others. And in this photo, I'm doing a presentation with some students in Falls Church, and I have this little watershed model. If you haven't explored it, it's really cool. It talks about the environment. You have these little sprinkles, which are sources of pollution, like the green sprinkles are fertilizer and things like that. So you put them on the model, use a little spray bottle, you make it rain, you see where it goes. Hint, it goes into the lake. And then after that, you do a bunch of green behaviors. You plant rain gardens, which are little sponges. You talk about picking up animal waste so you don't put as many of those sprinkles down. And through all these different behaviors, you see that we can actually influence the amount of water which is moving downstream. So these kids loved learning about cause and effect, and they liked actually changing a lot of different things on the model to see what they could do to influence the changes that led to cleaner water. And here they're learning the knowledge and the skills needed to make a positive impact and advocate for their health, their community, and for the environment. So thank you again for joining us during this webinar today. And I hope that through this short presentation and the rest of our speakers that you feel empowered and supported wherever you are in your advocacy journey. Like you, I'm really interested to hear from the rest of our speakers. So from here, I get to turn it over to Amy.
Thank you so much, Ashley. That was wonderful introduction to advocacy. I'm going to pop my screen up. Just a moment. Okay. So I'm Amy Euland, and I am the board president and stream monitoring program coordinator at Loudon Wildlife Conservancy. And I am here today. Oops, I just lost my screen. There we go. I am here today to talk to you all about a project that we did in Luckett's where we took community science data and used it to transform water quality and public health in a small town called Luckett's. And I'm going to have to stop sharing because I lost the screen again somehow. Give me just a moment. Hopefully I'm not going to lose it this time. Okay, so a little bit about Loudon Wildlife Conservancy. We're a nonprofit whose mission is to protect, preserve, and restore wildlife habitat. And we do that through a variety of ways. We have a lot of educational programming. We do habitat conservation programs. We do a lot of advocacy. And we also have a lot of community science programs, including our stream monitoring program. We also own and steward an 89-acre parcel of land outside of Luckett's called the J.K. Black Oak Wildlife Sanctuary. And in terms of our stream monitoring program is volunteer powered and science driven, and it focuses on three main community science initiatives, including conducting benthic macroinvertebrate surveys at 28 sites around our county, documenting road salt pollution levels at nearly 80 sites, and both of those programs are done in partnership with the Isaac Walton League of America. And we also conduct monthly chemical monitoring at 6 sites in partnership with the Alliance for the Chesapeake Bay. So the story that I'm going to tell you today starts back in the spring of 21, when some of our volunteers gathered on the banks of a stream that runs alongside the J.K. Black Oak Wildlife Sanctuary. They were sorting through tiny critters collected from a benthic macroinvertebrate survey. And what they found wasn't just bugs, it was evidence of a pollution crisis. So what started as a simple stream survey became a catalyst for change. And we use this data to advocate for cleaner water and push for solutions that improve water quality and public health, especially for underserved communities. So this story takes place in Luckett's, which is a small rural community in Loudoun County, up in the northern part of the state. And this area has karst geology, which is important because whatever happens in the surface water can quickly impact the groundwater. And this is important because most of the residents here rely on wells for their drinking water. So here's the parcel of land that is the wildlife sanctuary. And it's just outside of the village of Luckett's, and it's home to globally rare wetlands and sensitive species. And on the eastern edge of that sanctuary is a small tributary that flows from the northern part of the property to the southern part, past a mobile home community and into Limestone Branch, and ultimately into Potomac River. So we are working in partnership with the Nature Conservancy to do some wetlands conversion work here. And we wanted to understand the health of this tributary before and after that conversion work to see if there was a difference. So we conducted baseline surveys at 2 sites, one upstream and one downstream, about a quarter-mile apart. So we used the Isaac Walton League of America's Virginia Save Our Streams protocol, and our volunteers conducted initial surveys in May of 21. So the upstream site got a great score of 10, which indicated acceptable ecological conditions. We were really excited. We found a diversity of critters there, including pollution-sensitive ones like mayflies and beetles. But downstream site was a totally different story. That one received a score of 5, indicating unacceptable ecological conditions. And the only critters we found there were leeches and midges, which are pollution tolerant. So this was our first sign that something was wrong. And we needed to figure out what it was. So our first form of investigation was to just do a stream walk. So we started upstream and we started going downstream. And about halfway through the 2 sites, we found this wastewater treatment plant, and which was part of the mobile home community. And this was actually permitted to discharge effluent directly into the stream. This seemed like a great place to start. So we reached out to the Friends of the Shenandoah River, who kindly conducted some certified lab testing for us to analyze a sample of the effluent. And what they found was very disturbing. The E. coli level in the effluent sample was over 192 times the permit limit for this facility. So this level of bacterial contamination posed serious risks, not just for the environment, but especially for the mobile home community whose drinking water well was located not far from the stream. At this point, we knew that we had to act. So once we pinpointed the problem, we knew that data alone wasn't enough. We had to take action, and that meant focusing on 4 key strategies. First, we built strong partnerships with government regulators and community groups to make sure that our work was taken seriously. Finding the right partners was a little challenging, but it was essential. We also secured funding to expand our testing and provide real solutions for the affected residents. We also worked directly with the community to understand their concerns and build trust. And finally, we engaged with regulatory agencies to make sure that the problem wasn't just reported, but addressed. So these 4 strategies were critical for turning data into impact. But change did not happen overnight. So I'm going to walk you through this journey, starting with how our monitoring data led to regulatory action, and then about how we work directly with the community to address public health concerns. So after we did our initial benthic surveys and the initial E. coli testing, we submitted that data to the Virginia Department of Environmental Quality, and this opened up new lines of communication. That's when we learned that this facility had been previously under investigation by the EPA, but our data prompted DEQ to take a fresh look at things. So they started a search for a third-party lab to conduct their own E. coli testing. And in September, we conducted a second E. coli test with the Friends of the Shenandoah River to confirm the issue. We later became aware that ironically, DEQ actually sampled that very same day and also started their regular on-site inspections at the facility. So at this point, we had regulatory attention, but we needed resources to sustain the long-term monitoring and support the impacted community. And that is where funding came in. So in January of 22, we secured a $41,000 grant from the Google Data Centers Grant Fund. And we had applied for that in October of 21. So this funding allowed us to begin regular E. coli sampling with testing done at an accredited lab. And we were also able to provide direct support for the affected community. So from February to December of 22, we collected 29 rounds of E. coli samples and tested them from both discharge pipe and multiple stream sites, along with our routine spring and fall benthic surveys to continue tracking the stream health. And then in March of 22, the EPA took a major step based on accumulated data and ongoing site inspections. They mandated the complete replacement of the wastewater treatment facility within 2.5 years. But even within knowing that we were going to have a new facility on the horizon, we knew that our work wasn't done. We continued monitoring, and surprise, surprise, we found more violations. So in July of 22, we discovered and documented massive amounts of accumulated sewage solids near the discharge pipe at the facility. That's basically partially treated waste just collecting in the stream. So we immediately reported this to DEQ and the EPA, and this resulted in DEQ mandating a cleanup and issuing a $12,000 fine against the facility. At this point, we knew that regulatory enforcement was necessary, but we still weren't sure if the new facility would fully resolve the problem. Fast forward to September of 24, and the new wastewater treatment facility was finally completed and certified to operate. Yay! But we knew from experience that just because a problem is fixed on paper doesn't mean it really is. So we kept monitoring the facility. In November, we conducted a follow-up assessment at the discharge pipe and found this charming large floating brown mass, which we reported to DEQ, and that triggered weekly inspections of the facility. So what they found next was actually even worse. Among numerous other violations, a trench had been dug that completely bypassed the treatment plant and sent raw sewage directly into the stream. By January of 25, DEQ had gathered enough evidence against the facility to initiate a formal enforcement action against them. So while we continued to uncover and report violations, we also knew that the community couldn't wait for these regulatory fixes to take effect. So that's why we took direct action to support the neighboring residents. So we started our work in the community by listening. So going back in time a little bit, starting in March of 22, we worked with a local food bank who connected us with clients who were living in the affected communities. And this gave us the opportunity to talk directly with residents about their drinking water concerns. What we heard was alarming. Most families didn't trust their tap water and were spending money on bottled water, up to $3,000 for some families, even while relying on food assistance. So to build trust, we worked with local organizations who were already working within the communities. And in April of 22, We hosted a meeting with these communities to explain the wastewater issue and offer free comprehensive drinking water testing. We tested 17 homes and the results surprised us. There was no E. coli found, and all of the samples met the state drinking water standards, which was great. But despite these findings, the families still didn't feel safe drinking their water. The issue, thankfully, wasn't contamination, but it was water hardness, which affected the taste of the water, and deep-seated concerns about water safety that were reinforced by cultural and community beliefs. So to address this, in August of 22, we installed high-quality countertop carbon water filters with a 4-year supply of replacements and electronic descalers for the hard water in every home that we tested. And at the end of last year, we secured funding to purchase replacements for an additional 2 years, ensuring that these underserved families have continued access to safe and good tasting water. So everything that we accomplished in this project, from data collection to regulatory action and community engagement, has led to measurable, life-changing results. This wasn't just about addressing pollution, it was also about improving lives. 17 homes housing 63 individuals now have reliable access to safe drinking water. The economic impact is significant. By eliminating reliance on bottled water, these families are projected to save a combined $375,000 over 6 years. In fact, the residents joke that Costco is going to be going out of business soon because they're not purchasing water there anymore. And our efforts contributed to the construction of a new wastewater treatment facility, but more importantly, to continued regulatory enforcement that ensures it operates properly. And through our 4 years of monitoring, we proved that sustained oversight is critical because even after the new plant was completed, violations continued. This project demonstrated that persistent monitoring, creating value partnerships, and community action don't just solve environmental problems, they create long-term change. So I've shared with you how our volunteers use data to drive real change. But this isn't just our story. Any water quality monitoring group can do this. Here's how you can apply these lessons in your own work. First, go beyond the data. Remember that collecting data is just the first step. Real impact comes when you use data to drive action. Second, build strategic partnerships. Work with those who have the authority, resources, or connections to move your findings forward. Third, engage the community. Data is more powerful when people see how it affects their daily lives. Oops, sorry. and when it affects their daily lives. So you want to build trust through outreach and education. Fourth, you want to empower your own volunteers. Community scientists can do more than just collect data. They can uncover and solve real problems. And finally, advocate for accountability. Reporting the data isn't enough. You have to stay engaged, push for enforcement, and continue monitoring to ensure that action happens. Every one of us has the power to make a difference. The question is, how will you use your data to create change? So thank you all so much for listening. And now I'm going to pass it over to Patricia.
Thank you, Amy. That was really, really interesting. My name is Patricia Kalatasti. I will get these slides started here. My name is Patricia Kalatasti. I'm the Environmental Program Supervisor for the town of Christiansburg, Virginia. Christiansburg is in the southwestern-ish part of the state. If you're familiar with Virginia Tech or Radford University, we are located close to right in between them. We are a relatively small town, under 25,000 residents, and we have a whole lot of regulatory requirements that we have to meet. And that's where the Save Our Streams benthic monitoring through volunteers has become a really, really big help for us in terms of meeting those requirements. That picture that you see there is one of our stream restorations in the middle of a very urban park, where there actually is, I think that's actually pretty close to where they're doing the benthic macroinvertebrate monitoring. So why are towns monitoring streams? Why am I getting into this at all? It's driven by something called the Municipal Separate Storm Sewer System Permit. And what that is it's a permit. It's called MS4 for short. Sorry. And if you are an urban municipality or other public entity, so for example, a college, university, the Virginia Department of Transportation, cities, towns, counties, you are required to have a permit to collect stormwater and discharge the stormwater into streams. And that is a portion of the Clean Water Act. Urban can be a little tricky. Urban definition comes from the US Census. A US Census defined area with a population of at least 50,000 is considered urban. So even if you are a tiny little town of like 800 people and you collect stormwater, but you're in the middle of something that the US Census has defined as urban, you have to have this MS4 permit. It encompasses small school systems, like I said, towns, and it comes with some really specific requirements if streams are classified as impaired. And you can't really tell necessarily what's going to be called urban. That picture there is one of our stream restorations. The stream on the right is your typical old agricultural stream with vertical banks, the banks collapsing into the water, and it looks pretty rural. That entire area is encompassed in the US Census defined urban area, including that farm that you see in the distance on that hilltop. And that's because of what's around it. You can see a housing development to your right, and this area is actually in the middle of a pretty dense housing development. So you can't tell, you have to go to the census pages and see what they have. But MS4 permits come with really specific requirements if you have impaired streams. So what does that mean? The Clean Water Act and Virginia's state laws have specific wadable, swimmable, fishable standards, and they're not the same. Something can be fishable, but not be swimmable. And if your stream or river doesn't meet that Virginia standard for any of those, and there's a whole set of pollutants that are included in this, then it's considered impaired. That's the first step. If it's impaired, then the state is required to do something called a total maximum daily load development. It's a pollution diet study. So they look for specific pollutant sources. Those sources are identified. They compare the amounts in the stream that is impaired to another nearby stream that's considered not impaired and decide what is the maximum amount of this pollutant that can be in this impaired stream in order to make it not impaired anymore. And that's called a load reduction. So we're looking to say, how do I take this impaired stream for this specific pollutant and make it not impaired anymore, make it clean, make it support everything. It supports aquatic life, it supports people swimming in it, it supports having people fish from it. There's lots and lots of pollutants. The one that really comes to mind with the Save Our Streams benthic macroinvertebrates is sediment, because there actually is a impairment. It's called, you can see on here, this is the development for Crab Creek, which is the stream that flows through Christiansburg, the general standard or a benthic impairment, and that's considered sediment. And they actually do that by looking at benthic macroinvertebrates. As Amy said, there are lots of other things you can find out as well. There are other impacts that other pollutants can have on the benthic macroinvertebrate community. So it's useful for multiple things. You can see there that Crab Creek has a fecal bacteria standard, and that is because it is considered impaired for E. coli. So what do these reports do? They name responsible parties. And often the responsible parties are usually municipalities, so counties, towns, colleges, universities, school systems. And those responsible parties are said, you have to reduce your load of this pollutant by this much. And you're given a specific number that you have to achieve. And then within the report are ways to possibly achieve that. There are ones given to the agricultural community. Those are not enforceable. The ones that are given to communities with MS4 permits are enforceable by the state and the EPA. So bringing these loads down is really important to, well, from the standpoint of fiscal responsibility to avoid fines to our small town, and in general, to have a clean environment for our residents. And Save Our Streams monitoring, I can use that as data for trends in stream health, which is really important. So to give you an idea as to what might be happening where you are, Christiansburg is about here. So this is the places in the state that have approved total maximum daily load plans. So they have a set air pollutants here. This is the pollutant we've studied. This is the amount that a pollutant needs to come down to clean up the stream. The purple ones are sediment. So if you live near any of these that are purple, you could probably be a part of reducing that sediment by talking to your local municipality. The hatch marks are nutrients in general. The kind of teal one is specifically phosphorus and nitrogen. And I think some of those aren't here are PCBs, there's mercury, there's all sorts of ones. But this is just ones where that TMDL has been done. If you look at impaired, this is the whole state or most of the state. Sorry, I cut off the far east and the far west. They wouldn't fit. And look a little bit of Loudoun County up there too. Every place you see red on there, which is mostly a perennial, reasonably large stream, all those red, those are all impaired. The blue means there's no data. They tend to be tributaries to what you see as red or green, small tributaries, and just no one's tested them. And then the green are called fully supporting. There are clean streams. So you can see anywhere you live in the Commonwealth, you've probably got an impaired stream near you. And I don't have maps from West Virginia and Maryland, but a lot of the Eastern US is really similar. So how does this help? SOS monitors and MS4 compliance. Volunteers are a really great resource for me. As an MS4 permittee, the town of Christiansburg has to show that we've done yearly public participation activities that actually contribute to public knowledge and stream health. SOS monitoring counts. It's really helpful to me as someone who's managing this program as a regulatory part of our program. I can count on those volunteers. If they miss one, one of their their quarterly SOS monitorings, that's okay. I still count it. And that's something I can depend on. They're in contact with me. They tell me what they're doing, and something I don't have to worry about. If some of my other school outreach or outside activities are canceled because it snows or rains or something like that, I've got this that I can count on, which is really important. Save Our Streams monitors are extra eyes in places where we don't have a lot of visitors. One of the spots in Christiansburg that the SOS monitors do is it's a 14-acre stream restoration within a 22-acre passive recreation park. And people who go down there are pretty much people walking their dogs. Nobody really goes down into the stream. I don't get a lot of feedback, but they give me feedback. They can tell me if something's caved in. They can tell me, honestly, if they see trash. They can tell me if we have people driving four-wheelers through there again. That's happened. When they're in really public parks, like they are in one of our very urban parks, they draw attention to the stream in a really good way. They can talk to people, people ask them questions, kids are interested. It shows adults actually using the stream to come up with data. And that's, I think, a really important part of understanding that these streams are very much a part of our community and matter to everybody. I can use it to monitor trends and alert to possible issues. For example, we had what I thought was a spring and turns out to be a French drain, putting out a lot of mud for probably 6 to 8 months. Our SOS, the counts in the stream went down, the counts of the benthic macroinvertebrates. Eventually it turned out the mud was actually from a really slow water main leak about 1,000 feet or more away, way uphill, which caved in and then shot out a lot of water through this French drain and a lot of mud. But so now I have actual numbers now and actual data to say this is one way that this mud has affected our stream. And now we're looking at, are the SOS or the benthic macroinvertebrates coming back? So that at least lets me show how to report this water line break that fed into the stream. I now have some data to say, is it coming back? I don't know, but at least have something to lean on. It can support stream restoration efforts. I don't have pre-data on our stream restorations just because they happened before we really thought about this. But it can show what happens as they mature. That could be good, that could be bad, that could be inconclusive. I don't know, it's data, but having it is helpful to actually look at trends. Our volunteers can have input on ecosystem management. They see what's going on. They have direct access to town staff, where we can bring that back to other parts of town staff and kind of see what is going on, what trends do we see, what's working in our restorations, what is not. And then also having that active volunteers already, I can use that to support grant applications, especially private grants. I can use that if they agree to support as in-kind contributions. So we have volunteers, they've agreed to do one yearly monitoring, something they know they can accomplish. And that is really helpful because grants almost always come with cost sharing that we have to do. So how would you do that if you're interested in cooperating and partnering with a municipality, city, county, university? Search the municipality website. If they have an MS4 permit, they are required to have stormwater information posted with some sort of contact. The contact may be a form for a comment that will go to somebody because they have to report all that, and you should be able to get in contact with someone. If you're looking for a name or a place, these people are typically housed in a public works or facilities or engineering department. You can always call and ask. If it's a large university or a large county, they may not know. But if it's a large county or a larger city, they're probably going to have information on their website that's pretty easy to find. If it's small, they probably can tell you over the phone. And so with that, I will send it over to Carol.
Okay. Let me get my video turned back on. Oh, whoop. Okay. And I'm going to share my screen. Let's see. Oh, here we go. Can everybody see the screen? Building local advocacy for water quality?
Yes, looks great, Carol.
Okay, great. Perfect. So, as Patricia said, my name is Carol Kaufman, and I'm a master naturalist with the New River Valley chapter of Virginia Master Naturalists. I'm also a certified stream monitor with SOS, and last year became a certified trainer. So, I've been pretty active with the organization and the work that we've been doing. We really have a pretty robust group of monitors in the New River Valley. We probably have about 20 certified monitors, and we monitor a little over a dozen streams in the New River Valley. And what I'm going to be talking about today is focusing on the relationship that we have with Patricia and with the town of Christiansburg. And it started actually, my connection with Pat started as a result of a previous project that the Master Naturalists had been involved in, and that was an invasive plant management project that was looking at making sure that any invasive plants that might be encroaching on the stream restoration work that was done in the riparian buffer that was put in place in Town Branch Stream, which is a stream that runs through Depot Park. The person that was in charge of that particular project referred me to Pat because I was new to stream monitoring. I started in 2021. And I was looking or scoping out some locations in the community that may benefit from stream monitoring. They pointed me to Patricia, and we pretty much hit the jackpot with Patricia. So I started the collaboration with her in spring of 2022. And when you're looking for who are the right people to contact, she already mentioned some of those places or people to call, but she checked all the boxes. She's the environmental program supervisor. She was also a former stream monitor, so she was very much familiar with the SOS protocol and the value and benefits that would be inherent in doing biological monitoring. And she also mentioned the MS4 permit, which is one of the drivers of why they need the information that they need. So she was really the perfect person for them to refer me to. And she's been a tremendous help in helping us identify locations around Christiansburg that need to be monitored or should be monitored, particularly those that had been they had stream restoration projects. She's also given us access or was able to facilitate getting us permission to go to some of these sites that we ordinarily would not have been able to get to. So she's been a great facilitator for us. But then we also, as she said, we share all of the data with her. If we see something unusual, then we contact her and she can follow up. And I think she mentioned that that water leak that resulted in all the mud being released into the streams, and it did. I mean, we saw a difference in the scores for a town branch as a result of that event. So we started with the stream restoration area in Town Branch, and we expanded from 1 to 3 monitoring sites in spring of 2024. So it's been relatively recent that we've been doing expansions of the monitoring, but as Patricia mentioned, usually once they do a stream restoration, they're really interested in seeing, what impact it might have had. Has it improved the water quality? So one thing that we'd really like to do in the future that unfortunately we weren't able to do with the Town Branch project was do a pre-monitoring of a location that is earmarked for a stream restoration effort. And so that we would have some more comparison data to go in. The last item that I have here, the increased community awareness related to water quality. If you look on the right-hand side, that is actually a sign that it's like a yard sign that we post at whatever stream we're monitoring at. And you would be surprised at how many people, especially in Depot Park, because it's a wonderful park, has a playground, a soccer field, basketball hoops. There's a lot of traffic through there. And when we put that sign up, invariably people come by and they're curious. What are you doing? What's this all about? And we've actually had people who stayed for the duration of the monitoring session, watching what we were doing and asking us questions. So there's a lot of value in the visibility that we have on being on site and basically advertising and educating the public on the importance of water quality. And, it goes the gamut. It's kids as well as adults and, everyone in between. So that's been our involvement with the advocacy at the local level in Christiansburg, Virginia. And we're hoping to expand that to some of the other streams and localities within the New River Valley that we service, because we do have many other streams. So it's really important to connect with who in that local government or the organizations that would have a direct impact on the usefulness of that data. So I think we're getting close to time. So I'm going to end there and open it up, I guess, Maggie, to any questions that might have come in.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you all so much. I really appreciate hearing from you all. It's so fascinating and encouraging to hear about the great work you're doing across the state and all the ways that you've used the Virginia Save Our Streams data that you collect. So yeah, everyone, you can continue to put questions in the Q&A. We've had a couple of questions come through. The first question is for Amy about the The Luckett's project, they say unbelievable. What, if any, impact did the residents of the mobile home park experience? And what about the owner of the mobile home park? Was a functioning treatment plant ever built? So I think kind of just wanting like a, where are we at now? What has happened since the kind of conclusion of what you shared?
Um, so everyone is still using their filters and their descalers, which is great. That's also allowed us to build a good relationship with them. There's also a bypass issue going on in that town. And so one of the options actually went right through their neighborhood. So we were able to work with them on that issue and advocate that they choose a different route. Um, they always just sort of thought that that was the way that a wastewater treatment plant was supposed to work. So at least they're now aware that it's not. The owner of that mobile home park lives in California. And once the EPA mandated the construction of the new facility, he tried to sell the property with a bunch of other properties. That didn't work. So he ended up paying for a new one. As far as I can tell from the EPA Echo site, it is still not functioning properly. They've continued to have violations every quarter. The latest one looks like a bunch of chlorine, which means that they're over chlorinating to compensate for the fact that it's not cleaning the water. But I haven't been able to get more information from DEQ because it's still under investigation.
Got it. Thank you. And a related question that I think any of you all would be able to speak to this one. Do you have any suggestions for situations where the environmental authorities are less responsive? I think we've heard stories today of great partnerships, with DEQ, EPA, with the town in Christiansburg. What if you kind of don't have that great relationship right off the bat? Any suggestions?
I'll just say just keep trying because we had to go through multiple authorities to finally find the right one. We started more on the local level and realized we had to go much higher. So just keep trying. And even within the same regulatory agency, there is staff turnover. So if you're not getting a good traction with one person, wait a little while and try again. There's someone else.
Yeah, and don't be afraid to go, like Amy said, beyond the locality. I've found working, I mean, as a town, most people will be like, well, you don't want to talk to DEQ. I find that they're really helpful. I call them in when we have problems that we can't handle and that I need help with. And they're great. And like Amy said, sometimes it just depends on who you talk to. Try call 4 or 5 people. Sometimes I call 4 people before I find out who's the right person. And you just need to do that. A phone number is good. Emails sometimes get ignored. If you can find the phone number or you can find someone who will give you the phone number, do it and just start calling around. Eventually you'll find someone who knows who we actually talk to and you might get more traction.
I think there's also a lot of folks who might think, okay, let me talk to the person in charge. Let me talk to the next person up. Let me climb the chain. But there's also a lot of value in continuing to communicate with your peers and others who are doing the same kind of work that you are. There's often a possibility that they run into the same kind of roadblocks. And so they may have advice on how to get around a certain challenge or get to the right person. Also, I feel like a lot of work happens when you know the right folks. So if you are struggling to maybe find the right folks, talking to others in your community or in your networks about what you're going through and what you're experiencing, like we're kind of doing in this situation here, is really valuable because they might say, well, I talked to so and so in this department and they're not normally called in, but I knew them from somebody else and they helped me out with this thing. And then so you get some traction that way. Also, just increasing awareness of problems is a really great way to get more attention to it. I know that sometimes, especially with these larger kind of departments and organizations, having one person say, hey, there's a problem, doesn't have as much power behind it as 20 people saying, hey, there's a problem. So getting more people on board, and again, that education component of letting people know what's going on is incredibly valuable to any kind of advocacy work, but particularly environmental.
That's great. Thank you. Thank you. Lots of networking and phone calls. um, All right, we're at time, but we just have a couple more questions. Panelists, are you all right to take a couple more? Is that all right? Okay. So we have one question. Do you partner with other environmental nonprofits with similar interests or concerns?
Yeah, all the time.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, definitely. In fact, for the Luckets project, we were working with another nonprofit that was working with those mobile home communities about affordable housing. So that was kind of our in, even though it wasn't technically an environmental group. We, for the Salt Watch project, we also, part of the data that our volunteers collect is if there's trash at the site, and they usually clean it up. But if they can't, if there's too much, we partner with a local group called Keep Loud and Beautiful, and they come in with their volunteers and pick up all the trash. So those are a few examples.
We also have a relationship with an organization called Friends of Peak Creek, which operates out of Pulaski County. And they do stream cleanups, and the Master Naturalists help with that. We have obviously a monitoring site there. And, you know, they keep us aware of situations that might occur, spillages or whatever in Peak Creek stream. So we have a really good working relationship with them. In fact, as Maggie knows, we're doing a stream activity with 73rd graders from an elementary school at the end of September. So we're trying to work out the details of how that's going to work. But again, it's education and awareness and outreach. So
And I also wanted to mention that we wouldn't have been able to determine the problem with the E. coli if we hadn't reached out to another environmental nonprofit who's Friends of the Shenandoah River. So absolutely,
yeah.
partnership is where it's at.
Thank you all. Yes. And I mean, this is partnership right here, Isaac Walton League with Loudon Wildlife and the Master Naturalists and all of these groups working together. All right, we have one last question for Amy. Was there a language barrier at all for the residents in the community near the wastewater treatment plant? And how did you bridge that gap?
Yes, absolutely. So for our little community meeting, we had a native speaker who helped translate everything. She was part of that other nonprofit I was talking about that was working for affordable housing. I had to get really good at brushing off my Spanish from days of yore. So that was a big learning experience for me. I also had a couple other volunteers who had some Spanish speaking ability who went with me. I also relied on Google Translate a lot for a lot of the materials that I created. And I also made a cheat sheet of the technical vocabulary that I couldn't remember, which was really helpful. And then I also found out that even though a lot of them appreciated me speaking Spanish, they also spoke English. So when I finally couldn't have the words, they started speaking in English, and that was a big relief. But it was also important to recognize that I had to meet them where they were at. So yeah, using those resources was really helpful.
Great. Yeah. Thank you so much. Thank you all for staying a couple minutes over. And again, thank you panelists for taking the time to share your experiences with all of us. Thank you to all of the attendees. Really glad to have you here. I will get this webinar up on our YouTube page by the end of the day today, so you can check it out. And we will hope to see you at our next Clean Water webinar. So thanks everyone. Have a great rest of your day.
Bye.
Bye-bye.